Okay, welcome everyone. As we learn this wonderful Motzei Shabbos, our Shir and Shavuos is sponsored by A.B. Spry, the Refuah Shalema, for Toiba Reiza Bas Hinda, and for wonderful Zivugim for their daughter and grandchildren. We are also sponsored by Shelley Zeitlin for his wonderful children, Eli, Orit, and Ora, and for my refuah, Moshe Meir ben Eskafadel. We also have an anonymous dedication for spiritual, emotional, and physical protection for Yeshua Menachem Mendel ben Bela Shendel Rivka Be'ezus Hashem. We welcome in Stephen Holtzman, Jack Warman, Yaakov Warman, Shelley Zeitlin, Saba, A.B. Spry, Ben Zion Cohn, Eddie Chazan, Dr. Guy, Shimon Klein, Irving Fishbaum, Menachem Umansky, Yitzi Fuchs, Chaim Lerner, Rabbi Kranz, Bruce, good to see you, Michal, Nachman Chapler, Naftali Jablin, Richard Rosenzweig, Moshe Lehman, Elia Shutman, Yitzi Muller, Yeshua Yitzi Muller, Yeshua Shmuel Eisenberg, Chaim Braun, Reb Kaniel, David Helfka. I'm not sure who 914 is. We welcome here in the shul Ruvain Shannon. Welcome back. We missed you over Shabbos, and we welcome Michal Avram Chavin and Berish Gesseman. Dr. Block has just joined us for the 29th Zoomer of this early evening, and we are holding by Omar Mar on Daf Zayin Amud Beis. Omar Mar, 6 lines from the bottom. 6 lines from the bottom of Daf Zayin Amud Beis. Omar Mar, you know, when the Torah tells us that is kapara from the Sar of Yom HaKippurim, I would think to include one of 3 tumas. Amar yesh li ba'inyan zeh lahevi gimel tumas. Tumas avodah zarah. It could be thought that it's going to atone for the tumah of idolatry, the tumas gila arayis, the tumah of immorality, the tumah shvichas damim. The problem is, what kind of avodah zarah would need a kapara from this carbon of Yom Kippur? Hay avodah zarah echidami iba mezid. If a scoundrel like Eddie did it b'mezid, he gets executed. Bakatalu. Iba shageg, and if he did it unwittingly, bar carbon, there's a special carbon by avodah zarah. You have to bring a seira, a female goat. Says the Gemara, it's talking about those transgressions that don't have execution nor a carbon. Thank you. And what are they? Says the Gemara, b'mezid v'lo yasur bey. If Eddie did it b'mezid without hasra, so he wouldn't get executed. Or b'shaygeg v'lo yisyadalei. Or he did it unwittingly, but he never realized he did it. So that there's no carbon. Same thing says the Gemara, Gilei Aroyas Nami, top of Daf Chesam and Aleph, just getting underway over here on the Motzei Shabbos. And I pray to Hashem that my voice should hold up for everybody as we do this together. Shush, thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam she'akol niyeh b'dvar. Amen. Gilei arayis nami, immorality, hechidami, iba mezid, if Eddie engaged in immorality on purpose, bar katolo, we execute him. Iba shageg, and if he did it unwittingly, bar karbonu, he has to bring a regular chatas. So again, the Gemara answers, b'mezid v'lo yasur bey. Either he did it b'mezid, but there was no asra, so there's no execution. That's why he would need the kapar of the carbon. Or b'shaygeg v'lo yisyadalei, or he did it unwittingly, but he didn't realize he did it. Shvichas damim nami, because Eddie is an equal opportunity guy. Murder, we know that Eddie is on the run, So shvichas damim nami, hechi dami. Iba mezid, if he did it on purpose, pakatolo, we execute him. Iba shaygeg, he goes into the exile. Pagalasu. So says Gemara, either b'mezid v'lo yasrubei. Again, he did it willfully, but we didn't give him asra, so there's no execution. Or b'shaygeg v'lo yisiadale, or he did it unwittingly, but he didn't realize it. He didn't realize he did it. Inami, b'hanach delab b'nei golas dinu. Or it's talking about that he did b'shaygeg, but instead of doing it derech yerida, where it fell out of his hand when he was coming down, he was hoisting it up and it fell out of his hand. And when it's derech aliyah in an upward motion, there's no gullus. So there he needs the kapara of the carbon. What are you asking me?
Why should he get a kapara of doing it b'mezid with the carbon? There's no carbon, and there's a carbon because of this communal carbon. He gets a kapara.
Maybe that's a special gift of Yom Kippur. Yeah.
Okay.
But anyway, this is only a havamina because we know that it doesn't atone for these three things. I might think that for these three tumas, the sar atones. Talmud leimer mi tumais from tuma. From is a limitation. The like kol tumas. Now, which tuma is it going to atone for? So ma'amatzina shechalak hakasav miklal kalat tumais. Where do we find that the Torah makes a special distinction from all other tumais, but tumas mikdash u'kedashav, by the tumah of entering into the mikdash and eating kachim, because we know that there's a carbon oil of yared, as the Gemara is going to explain. Afkan, so here also where we have this unexplained tumah, it's talking about tumas mikdash u'kedashim. Dim Rabbi Yehuda. So the Gemara says, "My chalak." Where did the Torah make a special distinction by tumas mikdash u'kedashim? The Maisi Ba'il of Yared, because it introduced this sliding scale carbon, unique to if somebody entered into the Mikdash or ate Kachim B'Tumah, Eim Avodah Zarah. Avodah Zarah also has a unique thing. And that you bring, instead of the regular Chatis of a lamb, you bring the Se'ira, or Mai Chalak, the Maisi Se'ira of a Kizba. You bring a female goat, even if it's more expensive than the female sheep. Amrav Kahana, Anan Cholak Lahakel Kaminan. When we say that because we're offering a kapara, so a kapara, it would make sense to offer it where the Torah made a distinction in the area of leniency. A carbon oil of yared is an area of leniency, because if you're poor, you could bring two birds. If you're even poorer, you bring a meal offering. But v'hai chalak la'achmahu. But here, to be a seira, that's a chiluk l'chumra. That if the seira is more expensive, you still have to bring the female goat. Says the Gemara, well, but ema yoledes. Maybe it's mechaper for the tumah of a yoledes, a woman that gives birth. And a woman gives birth, the chalak, the maisi oil of yared. By a woman who gives birth, if she can't afford it, she could bring, instead of her carbon of an animal, she could bring an extra bird offering. So Amar Rav Aisha, no, it can't be for a yoledes, because a yoledes, now by the way, and what would be the kapara for the yoledes? So Rashi says that if she passes through a Yom Kippur, she could eat kachim and enter the mikdash without bringing her carbon yoledes, and that the sar of Yom Kippur would be mechaper instead of her carbon yoledes. Says the Gemara, it can't be the yoledes, because over here it says l'chol chatasam, that on Yom Kippur the carbon, the sar, is mechaper for a sin. Now in the case of the yoledes, she didn't do a sin. She did a big mitzvah. She brought a life into the world. It's just for a tumah. So it won't help for that. Says the Gemara, but Reb Shimon Yochai says she does do a sin. The reason why she brings a carbon is because when she's in such pain, she swears that she'll never be with her husband again. So how do you know it doesn't come to atone for the sin? Says, Rab Shimon goes according to his reasoning, that we know that the Sar is mechaper only for Tumas Mikdash Kedusha, the Amar Mimekaymahu Muchra, because it says L'chol Kodesh. So the pasuk itself tells us that it atones for Tumas Mikdash Kedusha and not for anything else. But the Gemara goes again and asks, well, Ema Mitzayra. Let's say that the Tumah that this Sar atones for is the leper. Amravashia again, l'chol chatasam v'loy l'chol tamasam. The Gemara does not assume right now that a mitzvah is a sinner. He has a condition which causes him tumah, but by Yom Kippur it says l'chol chatasam, not l'chol tamasam, and not only if it's an Indian of tumah. Says Gemara, but Reb Shmuel ben Achmeinu, midamar kol shiva dvar al shiva dvarim negam ba'in, that leprosy comes for 7 different sins. We know that Mitzayra stands for Moitzira, one who speaks evil. It also Saras Ayin, for one who is stingy. So then Mitzayra is a chet, then Ma'ikil Meimer. Says the Gemara, no. For the sin, the leprosy atones. The carbon is only allowing him to re-enter into the kahal. It shouldn't be badad yeshem mechutz l'machem like mashavai. And we welcome Marshall, who rounds us out to 30 Zoomers. Awesome. Nigei da'achaperle. It's the leprosy that atones for the one of 7 sins. The carbon l'shturei b'kal. And the carbon is only permitting him to come back into the kahal. Says the Gemara, and now it's nice to welcome in Danny Vogel for our 31st Zoomer of this young evening.
Can I add a name for Ilui Nishmas?
Yes.
Yaakov Moshe Ben Yosef.
We learn Ilui Nishmas, Yaakov Moshe Ben Yosef. His neshama should have a lichtige Gan Eden. Now, asks the Gemara, but wait a second. The aim of Nazir Tameh, we know that if a Nazir becomes Tameh, he has to bring bird offerings. The Chalak, the Maisi Tairim, they didn't necessitate a lot of animals, but they were lenient that they could be bird offerings. So maybe the Nazir Tameh is the issue that if Yom Kippur comes first, the Sa'ir of Yom Kippur atones for it. Says the Gemara, no, again. By the Nazir, over there by the Nazir, it's not that he's a sinner. He has to bring these karbanas to be able to start again his Naziris the Tara. But it's not for sin. Says that he says that Nazir is a sinner, because he says that if a person abstains from wine, he's considered a sinner. You're not supposed to abstain from God's gifts. Then Ma'ikil. So he says, you're right. According to him, Savalak Reb Shimon, he holds like Reb Shimon, that we know that the Sar is Mechaper for Kodesh because it says in the pasuk on the Kodesh. That's the Gemara now reviews Reb Shimon's opinion. Amar, Barish, I'm sorry to bother you. Could you give me a sugar?
Sugar or sweetener?
Sugar. I'm a sugar person. I'm a sweet rabbi. Amar, Reb Shimon Aimer, Reb Shimon says, Mimekaymahu muchra. we know that the Sar of Yom Kippur is Mechaper for Tumas Mikdash and Kedoshav, because Hariyoyma v'chiper ala Kodesh, it atones for the Kodesh mitumas shel Kodesh. Thank you very much. That's so nice of you. Thank you. So the Gemara says, Reb Shimon says a very good argument. What do you have to go look for any other reason? It says clearly that it's mechaper for kodesh, not for avodah zarah, not for immorality, not for bloodshed. So Shapakam Reb Shimon, just because Eddie is here doesn't mean we should think about it. Says the Gemara, Reb Yehuda Amalach. Reb Yehuda says that pasuk is coming to tell me something totally different. We know that the blood of the par and the sar on the inside, we apply once above and 7 below, like we say on Yom Kippur, achas v'shtayim. We apply it once above and 7 below on the inside, and then we also do it in the Kodesh against the paraikas, once above and 7 below. And Rabbi Yehuda says we know that from this pasuk. Rabbi Yehuda Amalach ha'um b'bailei ki heichi David l'fnei l'fnim. Just that, like we do, achas l'mala v'sheva l'mata in the Kodesh Kedoshim, so hachi navid b'heichel, we do this in the heichel too. Rabbi Shimon says no. That we know from another pasuk. Ha'um v'chein yaseh nafka. That we know because the pasuk says v'chein yaseh, so you should do in the Oyel Moed. Says Gemara Rabbi Yehuda, imahi. If it just said that, I might think that you have to bring another sar and another par and apply their blood on the inside. Imahi avamina nesi par v'sar achrine v'navid. Kamash malon. That's why it says v'chipra ala kodesh that you use the same animal. Reb Shimon v'chein yasel Oyel Moed. And when it says, and so you should do an Oyel Moed, that automatically implies from that animal itself. Minei mashma. And therefore, he doesn't need the word kodesh to tell you that. Now, and if you've just joined us recently, we are, oh my goodness, I didn't turn this on. Okay. How did I do that? Okay. For those that are listening to the digital recorder, we are starting 6 lines from the bottom of Daf Chesam and Aleph. Amamar. Yochel al kol tumah shebekodesh yeisar zeh mechaper. I might think for all the variables of tumah in eating kachim and entering the mikdash, this sar should be mechaper. Tamaloyma mipishayem lechol chatasam, from your rebelliousness for all your sins. Mind you, so what is that case? Yesh ba yedir b'tchila v'yesh ba yedir b'saif. If Marshall, where is Marshall? Okay, if Barry, there is Marshall. If Barry had awareness in the beginning and awareness in the end, that's the case where you have a carbon out of a yored. You don't need the carbon of Yom Kippur. Yesh ba yedi b'tchil v'yesh ba yedi b'soif ha'ibak carbonu. Says, no, the case is let's say he did it on Erev Yom Kippur, and it was right near Shkia, so he couldn't bring the carbon. So, like tzricha dis yada like samach l'shkia sacham. So, kedai techamina, I might think that Adamaisi, until he brings it after Yom Kippur will protect him. Nitlalei, Kamash Malon. We don't say that. It says the Gemara, Amamar, Minayin sheyesh bo yediyah betchila ve'ein bo yediyah b'seif. How do we know that it's for a situation where Barry knew initially that he was tummy, and then he ate the kachim, entered the mikdash without realizing it, and he didn't realize it afterwards either. He just was blissfully unaware that this Sar and Yom Kippur protect him until he realizes it. So Amar, the Gemara says, let's review Amar. Amar is like a gufa. Minayin sheyesh bo yedia betchila ve'ein bo yedia b'soif shesar zet toila. So the Gemara says, Minayin my kakashalei. What do you mean? What else is it? Hacha kakashalei. Hashta da amrit chatoim dumya depshaim. Now that you say that sins similar to rebelliousness, mapsham delav b'nei carbon, just like rebelliousness there's no carbon, because on a meza there's no carbon. Afchatam nami delav b'nei carbon. So also, sins they are also talking about we're not a b'nei carbon. So says the Gemara, Ema, maybe I should take that further. Ma'apsham delabnei carbon la'olam, that there's no carbon ever, because there's no mazid ever. Afchatam. So here, when it says that it's mechaper for sins, delabnei carbon la'olam, and that must be a case where Barry could never bring a carbon. What's a case where he can never bring a carbon? Where he wasn't aware that he was tummy before he did it. Because it has to be v'nelam, it became unknown, but he originally knew it. And what is that case? Where he didn't know initially, but then he realized it after he did it. Maybe that's where the Sar is mechaper. But if he had awareness in the beginning, and he doesn't know at the end, since when he finds out he'll have to bring a carbon, maybe it won't protect him, because it says it has to be like a pesha that there's never a carbon. But we said that if there's ein bo yedia b'tchila v'yesh bo yedia b'seif, the sar hanasa b'chutz, the musaf of Yom Kippur is mechaper. V'chitei ein bo yedia b'tchila v'yesh bo yedia b'seif, sar hanasa b'chutz v'Yom Kippur mechaper. So the Gemara says, so kedai t'chamina nepach mepach. Maybe we should switch it around and say that the sar in the inside, that's mechaper where ein bo yedia b'tchila v'yesh bo yedia b'seif. And the sar of the Musaf is mechaper for where he had a yediyah in the beginning and he didn't have the yediyah in the end. Amakra, so the pasuk says l'chol chatasam, for all the sins, michlal the b'nei chatois nino, that it's eligible for a chatas. So therefore, it must be talking about where there was a yediyah b'tchila. Says the Gemara, but why do you say that? If once the Sar and Yom Kippur is brought, it's only Taila until he realizes it. Maybe Sar and Yom Kippur should be mechaper entirely, that he doesn't have to bring a carbon when he realizes it. Meniskaper kapora gemura, says the Gemara, iksiv meichatasam k'dekamrit. Hashta d'chsiv l'chol chatasam, for all the sins, it means something that he'll eventually have to bring a chatas for. Lahanach the also the klal chatas. Says the Gemara, okay, so v'chi ma'achar shein mechaper, if Yom Kippur and the Sar is not fully mechaper, lama tayla. What's the idea of it suspending? Says the Gemara, well, if he dies before he brings the carbon, so before he realizes it'll be mechaper. Rab Zera loimesh im mace, that if he dies, mace below oven, he'll die without the sin. Says Gemara, you don't need Yom Kippur and the carbon for that. His death will atone. Amalei Rav mace misam amarekis. His death will atone for him. And Amar Rav, no, this will protect him that he shouldn't die until he realizes that he made a mistake. El Amar Rav, and it'll protect him from suffering until he realizes that he did it, and then he'll bring a carbon oil of Yerid. Now, the next case is the Sar of the Musaf. As we said, the Sar of the Musaf is Mechaper, where Barry didn't know in the beginning. And then he ate the Kachim or entered into the Mikdash, and then he became aware at the end that he was Tameh. So, now since there's no awareness in the beginning, he could never be Chayiv a carbon oil of a Yared. So, the Sar that's done on the outside, on the Mizbeach HaChitzayin, the Sar of the Musaf from Yom Kippur, and Yom Kippur together are Mechaper. Says the Gemara, well, that Sar and the Sar of the inside are juxtaposed to one another. They're next to one another. So says the Gemara, Michtei, let's examine. Iskushe Iskush. These two Seirim, the Sar Hanasa B'fnim in the Kodesh Kedoshim, and the Sar of the Musaf are juxtaposed. So let the inner Sar not only be Mechaper for the case of Yesh Bo Yedir B'tchil of Ein Bo Yedir B'Seif, but also for the case of Ein Bo Yedir B'tchil of Yesh Bo Yedir B'Seif. What do you need it for? The Sar of the Musaf is brought, where they didn't have enough money to buy an extra Sar. They forgot to do the Sar of the Musaf. On my cross, so the pasuk says, no, there's a miyat, achas. It says by the one that's brought inside, achas, kapara, achas mechaper, the inner soyer only atones for one thing, vein mechaper shtei kaparas. Okay, so that answers why the inner one can't atone for both. But since there's a juxtaposition, let the outer one atone for both. On the chaper chitzan adidei v'amay david penime, let it be mechaper for the one it's mechaper for, which is ein bo yedir b'tchila yesh bo yedir b'seif, and the one that the Sar Hanas B'fnim is mechaper for, which is yesh bo yedir b'tchila ve'ein bo yedir b'seif. And the nafkamina is l'tuma de'era bein zelazeh, that if after the Kohen Gadol did the avodah in Pnim, Barry had a situation on Yom Kippur where he had yesh bo yedir b'tchila ve'ein bo yedir b'seif, now the Sar Hanas B'chutz could be mechaper for it, which is done afterwards. Amakra, so again, the pasuk says achas pashana. The pasuk says once a year, and it's telling me kapara zu. This kapara for yesh bo yedir b'tchila ve'ein bo yedir b'seif loy tehei will only be al achas pashana, one time a year. So it can't be atoned for also by the Sar of the Musaf. Just going to pause a moment here to turn over the channel.